Black First family, welcome to Blacklogic. On today's broadcast, I'm gonna do some things that I normally don't do. I'm going to speak from a very heavy perspective with conjecture, and in some instances, I'm going to speak in hyperbole. And the reason for this is because we're talking about the BRICS, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which I believe is very important in what they're forming because they're allowing a lot of countries and then they are denying other certain countries, and they're trying to equate it to the point of in reference to their GDP. And the reason why this video is important to Black empowerment is because I want you to make the correlation and comparison in conjunction with the amount of money that America is sending to Ukraine. We're going to go over those numbers probably in the middle of this, but nonetheless, this is important. These are the things that we should know to understand global domination and how you take power back from the Western world, which these southern and eastern countries are essentially doing. Now, with that being said, let's jump right into it. What are the BRICS? The term BRICS is an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and South Africa. The coin was initially created as BRICS without South Africa by Goldman Sachs by Jim O'Neill in 2001, claiming that by 2050, the four BRIC economies will come to dominate the global economy, right? This is what America does. We project things. We see how countries are moving, their exports, their imports, their natural resources, all of those things of how they will essentially take power back from the white supremacy world of the West. South Africa was added to the list in 2010. The BRICS countries operated as a loose organization that seeks to further economic cooperation among members nations and increase their economic and political standing in the world. Now, what's important about this, I'm trying to figure out, because we know that 8 to 10% of South Africans are white, and they most mainly congregate in Cape Town, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, South Cape, whatever, in Cape Town, South Africa. And for a long time, that 8 to 10% was not only in political power, but also control the country's economy. Until this day, still control a vast majority of South Africa's economy. But there's a Black president in place as we speak. So that may turn the tide where his positioning and power could change some things within the economy. And then, of course, you have Julius Malema, who's doing this thing on the EFF side. So look for things to be shaken up in South Africa here in the next 5 to 10 years that is going to make the BRICS a more powerful union of all of these non-quote-unquote white countries. Now, with the exception of Russia, I know Russia doesn't really consider themselves white, but they're white because Russia resides in the East and they're most nearly close to China, talking about geographically, as well as India. But look how these countries are grouping together, because Russia has always been the stepchild of the Western world. They have never really been accepted. Don't forget, back in the day, Russia and China went against other Western worlds and countries. So in the US, we have a very deep and dark history with Russia called the Cold War, where that was kind of like the age of the spies. And that's why you always see these movies where there's Russian spies and American spies. They even had a show called The Americans, which these Russian spies were raised like Americans, were being taught and trained how to be American, speaking English, but they still knew Russian. They still knew Russian customs and things of that nature, but they did it to topple. They did it to gain information. They did it to be insiders that live as Americans in certain parts, but carrying out missions, and then even some resorts killing people that had no relations. But the other part of that is that America knew that they had these quote-unquote sleeper agents in America, and America was doing the same thing to Russia. But I digress. It's not about a spy movie or the things of the Cold War. No. This is about how these countries are gathering together in order to form a more perfect union against the Western world. And I'm mostly talking about the United States and Europe, right? Even though some countries, and have you seen any countries in Europe be part of the BRICS yet? Have you seen that? I mean, I haven't. And we're gonna go over some of the countries that are in the BRICS, but nonetheless, let's dive into a little bit more information here. It states that the BRICS is an acronym that refers to the countries already stated. Okay, the BRICS nations offer a source of foreign expansion for firms and strong returns for institutional investors. The organization seeks to deepen economic cooperation between the member countries and stand in contrast, stand in contrast to the Western sphere of power. As I stated before, this is about power. These about these countries that have been stronghold and powerless by the Western world, United States and Europe, for a very long time. And they are now showing in unification how people can gather together. Okay, listen, black folk, unifying and organizing, okay, making an organization and then unifying under the same band with the same goal in order to topple a white supremacy nations as the United States and Europe, okay? United States and Europe. This is what they're doing. And here's the thing. Could race play a role in this? Because when I think about some of the countries, there is still some colorism here, but nonetheless, I think this is more about power and money more so than anything else. They are tired of Europe. They're tired of the United States calling the shots. And they said, you know what? We can make a more perfect union. We can make better deals between each other if we form together. Now, everybody knows the history of Saudi Arabia and the United States of America. So Saudi Arabia was formed back in 1932, and then 6 years later, they struck gold when they found out they had numerous millions amounts of barrels of oil sitting in the desert and where they were. And then in 1945, of course, they became a powerhouse. Now, as you state here, back in 1932, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, an Islamic state with Arabic as its national language and the Holy Quran as its constitution. And what's important to that, the country is actually named by the founder, who's part of the Saudi family, who are the richest family, most likely in the world, worth over probably $1.5 trillion, okay? I just wanted to point that out very quickly because Saudi Arabia is now part of the BRICS, okay? And it goes on to state here that the organization seeks to deepen economic between the member countries and stand in contrast. I wanted to really point that out to you guys. Then Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Argentina were invited to join the BRICS in 2023, and most likely those countries are going to join the BRICS. Now, when I started to think about what is the importance of Saudi Arabia, Iran, Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Argentina were to join the BRICS, the first thing I thought of was not colorism, was not GDP, which that's one of the criteria. You need to have a certain GDP in order to join the BRICS. So again, it's about power, it's about money. But I started to think about their major imports and exports. Let me go to that very quickly here because I think that's what separates a lot of these countries that are being invited to the BRICS to kind of choke out and starve the Western powers, Europe and America. Now, when it comes to Argentina, I was thinking about, when it comes to Argentina, their major exports is corn, soybean oil, delivery trucks, and wheat. So we're talking about food when it comes to Argentina as their major export. When it comes to Egypt, 21% of their total export is gold, 19% is coffee. Okay, so now we have food, now we have natural currency like gold. Then of course, next in line is Egypt, petroleum and petroleum products. We're talking about oil. Now, before I move on to the other countries, I'm gonna jump right to South Africa and India here. So South Africa's major exports is platinum, gold, iron ore, diamonds, and coal briquettes, okay? And it says mostly exporting to China, United States, Germany, United Kingdom, and India, okay? So some of these guys are already in cahoots. Some of these guys are already in business. But believe me, ladies and gentlemen, that this is a global plan to choke out the West of their stronghold on power within the world economy. And they're doing a great thing. Let me tell you something. We're going to start depending on some of these countries because they're going to start to make these fair and equal deals that America has been getting over by not making fair and equal deals, especially when you're talking about the United Kingdom and the United States. Now, with that being said, India major exports is refined petroleum, diamonds, patric medicaments, jewelry, and rice, okay? That is for India. So when I started to really think about how do you really have a stronghold on power, there's a couple of things that a lot of people go over. I'm no economist, but the one major thing, especially before we transfer from fossil fuels to renewable fuels, is oil, okay? Oil, gas, natural gas, all of these things. So that makes me go back to this right here. When I look at the countries that are within the BRICS and how much percent of the world's oil that they have in their control, Saudi Arabia, 12%, Russia, 11%, China, 5%, Iraq, 5%, United Arab Emirates, 4%, Brazil, 4%, Iran, 4%. Already, that is 45% of the world's oil that is in the BRICS control already. Think about that, 45%. We see America is sitting around 20%. That's because when Obama came into office, he really started to sign legislation for us to start fracking some of the waste products of oil and regenerating that into oil that we can actually use. Then of course, soaking up all the natural gas deposit that sits on top of oil deposit, which resides in the earth. When I look at the amount of oil that these countries have in their control and their power, it's very, very extensive, and they can essentially choke out the rest of the world. But what's going to occur, a lot more countries are going to request to get inside the BRICS, but not every country will get inside the BRICS. This is strategic. This is strategy not only for global economic power, but it's also about global positioning. We're gonna get into the positioning and where a lot of these countries are located so you guys can understand what I'm getting at. But we're gonna take a deeper dive into some of the countries within the BRICS because like I stated before, let me go back here. One of the countries I didn't add when it comes to their amount of oil that they export is Egypt. So that number was not even computed in the 45%. I'm just gonna give Egypt around 4%. So we're already at 49%. So roughly, I like always surround a family. We're at 50% of the amount of oil that the BRICS already operate and control and have on hand. That's very powerful. That's very powerful. So let me go back and we're gonna break down some of the countries who have essentially been denied access to in the BRICS and some of the reasons why, which I think is very important. So Algeria denied admission to the BRICS, right? And it goes on to state here that India and Brazil have rated Algeria as a nation with a GDP per capita of $3,500, which is much too low for qualification and which is based exclusively on petroleum earnings. Comparatively speaking, Argentina has a GDP per capita of almost $10,000, which is logically placed it above Algeria on the candidate list. What does it matter? What does it matter? This is about money and global positioning, family. And again, I told you within this video, I'm going to be doing a lot of hyperbole, perspective, conjecture, bias. This is the way I'm seeing it because again, I'm looking at not only the global positioning, the amount of power that these countries by joining together have and how they can stronghold and choke out the West of their power domination for the past 100 years or so, but also the colorism that may lie within some of these things. But again, when it comes to Algeria, they're considered white in the United States. But nonetheless, a lot of these countries have a very closeness to whiteness. Okay, even India, they have an epidemic of people bleaching their skin, just as well as countries in Africa as well as the Caribbean. I digress. Now, it states that Algeria currently has a GDP of only 163 billion, which is on par with that of the rural U.S. state of Kansas, okay? And we always look at Kansas not as the poor state, but one of the poor states in America. So they're basically saying Algeria is a poor country. And based overwhelmingly on oil and gas earnings, if the price of fossil fuels falls, the Algerian economy falls proportionally. And what they're stating is, if that occurs, that hurts the BRICS. We're looking at countries that if the oil prices fall, they can pretty much sustain themselves and may not require assistance and support in economic funding from the BRICS country themselves in order for them to continue to operate, because this is a partnership. Not only is this an organization that they built to form a very powerful union against the Western countries like the United States and Europe, but also this is a partnership. They're going to make this more like a family. They don't want none of these countries to fail. So in order to do so, there's a vetting process. They're like, hey, listen, you don't have enough money. It's kind of like if you and your friends, like you have a great group of friends, you came up with this plan to buy 100 acres, and everybody needs to bring $10,000 to the table. One of your buddy only has $3,500. Like, hey, unless you get your weight up or you have other assets that you can bring to the table, we can't allow you inside this partnership, because if something falters or something falls or something happens on your personal life, that may hurt the investments that we have going forward. All of these things are very powerful. And I see the way they're going about this. They're going about this very strategically and very intelligently, in my opinion. Now, let's move on. It states here, will ASEAN join the BRICS with the addition of 6 more countries to the BRICS during the group's recently concluded summit in Johannesburg, that's in South Africa? The big question now is whether the Philippines and ASEAN partners are keen on being part of the emerging economic grouping that could alter the global economic landscape, okay? And we're gonna kind of walk through some of these stories, and we're gonna basically just kind of do a rough overview of the headlines, okay? Navigating between big hopes and small steps. Developing nations convene in Johannesburg under the theme of BRICS and Africa, okay? So that already tells me that there's gonna be a lot of African countries they may try to join the BRICS or may be accepted by joining the BRICS, because here's something: Nigeria requested access in joining the BRICS, but they was denied. And some of the major reasons that I'm believing or I'm thinking is because, unfortunately, Nigeria has a lot of corruption. And I know a lot of countries have a lot of corruption. Even United States of America has corruption. But there's a certain level of corruption that's acceptable, believe it or not, right? It's kind of like your children. There's a acceptable amount of things that they can do before they tick you the hell off and you want to whip their tail, right? They did something, hey, stop that. You'll continue to keep warning them. But when it comes to Nigeria, everybody was expecting, and I forgot the gentleman's name, but quite recently, there was a presidential election. There was a lot of things going on in Nigeria, and they was expecting that the younger presidential candidate was going to become president of Nigeria, but it turned out to be the old guy. And the younger generation wanted the younger guy to be in power because he came with more futuristic views and goals for Nigeria in order to move into the next generation of technology, equality, and some other things that were essentially on the table. Where the old guy, he was old school, he's still old school, and believe it or not, they believe he's still in the pocket of the West. So there's still a great level of corruption, according to a lot of news stories that's coming out of Nigeria. And quite frankly, you can just go on YouTube and TikTok and see how people are speaking out against the presidents in power now and the amount of corruption that's going within the Nigerian government. I don't know in-depth knowledge, so I won't speak to it to an exact, but nonetheless, Nigeria has the largest GDP and one of the largest populations, if not the largest population in Africa. So those are very significant. And I was wondering why they got denied access to join the BRICS. But again, it's probably past the threshold of the amount of corruption that the BRICS do not want part of their organization. And then I also thought about the colorism. I told you I was going to bring it up. They're like, hey, listen, we already got a black guy in here. We don't need no more black people. We got Asian, we got white with the Russians, and we got South Africa. And, some of you are like, well, Egypt and Ethiopia. But when it comes to Egypt, a lot of these so-called Egyptians, and not the Nubian Egyptians. Now, the Nubian Egyptians are my complexion, maybe a little lighter, maybe a little bit darker. But the so-called Egyptians believe that they're like this light, very light tan color, almost like a light-skinned black person. And they're Arabic to a certain degree. But again, family, I'm not going to get into a whole history debate. But most likely, those Egyptians who are in power, those Egyptians who are considering themselves Egyptian are the invaders who invaded Egypt and basically took over and owned and operated Egypt today. And then when it comes to Ethiopia, now family, we understand from the tether class that a lot of Ethiopians do not even consider themselves black. So there you have it. Not only is it colorism, but there's a certain ideology that goes with it as well. I digress. Now, moving on. It states here that China plays a pivotal role in enhancing BRICS cooperation. All right, what the BRICS bloc's expansion means. The expansion will further establish BRICS as a counterbalance to the G7, calculating their share of global GDP to 36%. So by the BRICS joining together, they're going to have and control 36% of the world's economy. That's more than a third, family. That is staggering, right? And they say it's a counterbalance to the G summit. That means to the counterbalance of the white nations. That's what they're getting at. Now they're talking about Russia and Brazil considering co-producing films together. Cultural authorities from Russia and Brazil are discussing the possibility of reaching an agreement on joint film production. Russia eyes collaboration with India and quantum tech. Okay, of course. Of course, Russia is trying to get more innovative when it comes to technology, just as well as South Africa, just as well as Brazil. And there's been a lot of other countries who have been falling by the wayside by being exacerbated from the West from their innovation and technology. Because we know that a large class of Americans who deal in IT and coding and innovation and new products are from India. So this is very, very powerful. If India starts to do more business with China, if India starts to do more business with South Africa and Brazil, believe me, family, we're going to see a decline to a certain extent. But don't forget that India has the majority of the world's population at 1.4 billion people, which is roughly a couple of 100,000 more so than China. So already you have what? Almost 3 billion people in Asia that is part of the BRICS already. So we're talking about in a massive workforce. And a lot of these people are doing the work for America. A lot of our products, when it comes to technology products, not the microchips and not the essentially the software, but the hardware comes out of China. Guess who designs the software? Guess who writes the coding? It's India. When you guys called up a lot of these places, not only are Indians the call center people, but they're also the people who are those who are in Silicon Valley, those who are working for Tesla, those who are working for Oracle. There are a lot of Indians here in America and abroad that's doing the work that Americans used to do. So the reason why this is very important, I'm getting around the money, I'm getting around the power, because when you have all these countries together, and they're kind of collaborating and organizing, and they are not asking the Western powers to join their country. This is about global domination. This is about global power and positioning. Let me move on. And see, they were talking about up here how they were going to start making films together. There's a film called The Wandering Earth. The Wandering Earth Part 2. I'm looking at it right now. The Wandering Earth Part 2 is on Prime Video. It's free if you got Prime. Go and watch that video, and I want you guys to look at the countries that are in the video. I want you guys to look at the countries that are in the video. The majority of the people are in the movie are Chinese. Secondly, they have some black people, even my complexion, from Brazil. They have some people. They have some other people that are from Spain or even maybe Argentina. But again, in order for you to understand what I'm talking about, go check out the Wandering Earth 2 on Prime Video. Okay. Now let's continue here. It says Russia eyes collaboration with India and quantum tech. And let's see, China and Russia announced their future plans for the moon, including a human base. Now we understand that, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, they have SpaceX, they have all these companies they're making to try to race to the moon or race to Mars in order to make these colonies and colonize Mars. But family, when I think about this, I'm like, if life is not sustainable by the atmosphere, this is again about global positioning and power. The moon is just a big glowing rock. Okay, there's no natural resources up there. I don't know if they're gonna go to Saturn or Jupiter and try to extract the gas, the hydrogen gas that's around the rings and use tubes. Who knows what the future holds when it comes to technology and the human brain? But nonetheless, they're trying to now colonize the moon, okay? The BRICS is now trying to colonize the moon. I told you, I'm gonna be dealing with a lot of conjecture and projecting and all sorts of things here. So I just wanted to point that out for some of you like, man, what the hell are you talking about? But again, this is all against the system of white supremacy. Do you believe it or not? Do you believe that these non-white people, okay, excluding Russians, that this is their plan in order to regain power? Because they understood that if we continue to stay separate, we don't have enough firepower. Our GDPs are not large enough. Our armies are not large enough. And that's another aspect that I didn't even get into. China has one of the largest armies in the world, if not the largest. Okay, if not the largest. That's one thing that we need to really think about. Now, last time I checked, for every one American soldier, there's 10 Chinese soldiers. And they had the second largest population on Earth. Now, when it comes to India, the first population, India is part of the BRICS as well. Again, I want you guys to throw this all in one big ball to understand the point that I'm essentially getting at. China expands its expedition to the Arctic and Arctic regions. Why is that? Now, a lot of researchers and explorers believe that there's large oil deposits in Antarctica and Arctic, and nobody really holds no global or political power or authority over the Arctic and Antarctica. But it's a race, family. They're trying to grab each and every pot of land. Have you ever thought about the moon being land? Have you guys ever thought about that? Because when we travel to the moon, they land on the moon. So there's land, but I don't know what you can do with the land, right? There's no oxygen. Things can essentially grow. They may start drilling inside the moon. It may crack the moon. Again, I just don't know. But family, the BRICS is very important to the global economy. And especially as being an American, especially being a Black American. Because this is a big smack in the face to Black Americans when I think about, not the BRICS, when I think about the US and what it has done historically to our people and the immense amounts of dollars that is sent to Ukraine. And then on the other hand, tells us that we don't have enough money, or we're not giving you guys, or we're not giving you guys what you are owed when it comes to reparations. It's a big smack in the face. And this is when the system of white supremacy is starting to fail, because not only do they have a declining population, okay? Because right now, when it comes to America, if you take out white Hispanics, the population of America is only 59% white. Think about that for a second. It's only 59% white. Now, this is why you see an influx of migrants, whether it be Afghanis, white Hispanics, or even brown Hispanics that has the ideology of being white. When you include those numbers, according to the Census Bureau, we're looking at America is 75% white when you include white Hispanics or those who identify as white Hispanics. They may even be brown in color, essentially. So think about that. That's the only way they can plus up their numbers, is because they have a declining birth rate. But I digress on that as well. So I'm going to move back to the display over here. It says, U.S. sends radioactive weapons to Ukraine despite their extreme danger to humans. The U.S. is running out of the conventional weapons to provide Kyiv, which is why it has recently started sending banned weapons such as cluster munitions and now even radioactive ones. Why would the BRICS point that out on their website? And this is at infobrics.org. Why would, and look at the key terms here. Extreme, dangerous to humans, because they are against it. That's why. Breaking ties with Russia and refocusing on France could destroy Armenia. Russian-Ukraine's counteroffensive causes unsustainable losses. If you see, a lot of even their news stories are counterproductive to the narrative that these Western powers want the world to know. Have you noticed that? Let me move on here. BRICS summit and affirmation of the BRICS agenda by country agency. Okay. All right. A lot of these we already went over. So let's move on. Now, this is a video I want you guys to listen to very quickly. Bear with me here.
Aimed at growing the bloc's clout, leaders of the BRICS group of developing nations have decided to invite 6 new countries to become members of the group. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said on Thursday,
"We have decided to invite the Argentine Republic, the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates to become full members of BRICS. The membership will take effect from the 1st of January 2024.
Expansion could also pave the way for dozens of interested countries to seek admission to BRICS, which is currently made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. On Thursday, Russian President Vladimir Putin told the BRICS summit that Moscow intends to deepen ties with African countries and that it would remain a reliable partner for food and fuel supplies. The debate over enlargement has topped the agenda at the 3-day summit taking place in Johannesburg. And while all the BRICS members publicly expressed support for growing the bloc, there were divisions among leaders over how much and how quickly. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi said the bloc's expansion should be an example to other global institutions founded in the 20th century that have become outdated.
So that's very important, family, because they want to grow the bloc. They want to grow their partnership with other countries. Now, Russia and China has been very instrumental to Africa's development. Now, we know that China has been economically colonizing Africa for some time, but hopefully by these other countries will come in and help do better deals versus these blood contracts that China has with a lot of these African countries. You know, there's Chinese ports in Africa, or will countries like Russia who come in with an open hand, offering friendship, contracts to help, again, build their infrastructures up in a lot of these rural countries in Africa, these very poor countries in Africa that have the majority of the world's resources. Will Russia come in with open arms to do fair deals to a lot of these poor African countries and help them build their infrastructure and not do these blood contracts like China? Or will the BRICS get China in check, say, hey, listen, we know you guys are raping and robbing the continent of Africa, but they can be a strong ally if we do things the right way, okay? Fair and honest way. Or will Russia then turn the cheek and do exactly what China's doing? I quite frankly don't know, okay? I can get some conjecture in that as well, but I won't go there. I don't even have enough information to give my projecting views on it. But let me tell you, a lot of things are going on in the global space. And when it comes to Black empowerment, family, these are things that on a higher level that we essentially can look at. I know we have to worry about where we are now, where we're here now, because this is where we live and this is where we are. But nonetheless, it's good to know what's going on in the world, because this soon can affect us in the next 5 to 20 years. And a lot of us are still going to be around the next 5 to 20 years. God so help us. But as we move on, I did a quick Google search and I said, you know, what are the countries that are leading in technology? You have the US, Japan, Finland, France, and China. A lot of times when you do these searches, they can be very broad, but it states that South Korea remains the world leader in technological advancements. And let me tell you, family, I lived in Korea for 4 years, and believe me, they're probably 7 to 12 years ahead of American innovation and technology. And it's not because they are smarter or they're doing bigger and better things. It's because America may have the technology, but America has a 5 to 7 year hold on technology. We have all these sub-organizations that test the technology to make sure that it doesn't give you cancer. They try to protect the American people. Then on the other hand, when it comes to the food in America, they try to kill you there. I digress. There's a lot in my mind right now, and it is all jumbled up, and I'm really trying to give it to you guys straight, because there's so much that goes on in the world that America keeps from the American people. And that's why they don't want people like Donald Trump to become president, because he's such a wild card that he may say and do things that a traditional president wouldn't do. Believe it or not, Barack Obama, okay, Forget his skin color. He fell in line just like any other president, but not President Trump. He's a wild card. And a lot of people are like, man, are you voting for Donald Trump? Hell no, unless reparations on the table, black empowerment, justice, making foundational black Americans protected class. No, not at all. I tell people, I stopped the whole political thing about 4 years ago. Democrat, Republican, listen, I'm just black. I'm just black. That's all I am. So again, we have China that is one of the world leader in technology. I want you to keep that in mind. Then when we talk about those countries that are leaders in IT and population, we already see China, Russia, India, and Brazil, which are part of the BRICS. That's why I pointed those countries out. Now it states here, aid to Ukraine. The administration requests more money and faces political battles ahead. President Biden has asked Congress for an additional $24 billion for the war in Ukraine, bringing the total aid to $135 billion. Such aid is critical not just for military operations, but for easing the war's humanitarian impact. Now, what's important here, family, is that when you take in reference to all the information I just gave you on the BRICS, and then America's forking out billions of dollars to Ukraine, but Russia has the backing of Brazil, India, China, and South Africa. Let me tell you, Russia does not need any help from the West. Russia does not need any help from the West, because if you haven't noticed, for a very long time, Russia and India, Russia and China have been doing business for decades. They've been in cahoots. They've been in war together. They have partnerships and organizations. So this thing was already in fruition probably 10 to 15 years ago. They need to figure out how they was going to do it and who they was going to invite. This was a plan, because in Chinese culture, I forgot the exact name. I know my memory forgets me today, but they have meetings every 10 years for the next 100 years of how they're going to go about bettering the economy and bettering the country of China. For every 10 years, they have a meeting to map out the next 100 years. So believe me, this was already in fruition at least 10 years ago of what they were going to do to take back some power from the Western world. Oh yeah, that is my belief. And it states here, U.S. to send controversial depleted uranium munitions to Ukraine, okay? And by the way, wait a minute. By the way, where did Ukraine get Abrams tanks from? Oh, America. That's right. So not only are we sending money, we have already sent equipment, major equipment. And guess also what we have on the ground in Ukraine? U.S. troops. I didn't state they were fighting, but we have U.S. troops, okay, as liaisons. I digress, okay? The Pentagon on Wednesday announced a new security assistance package worth up to $175 million for Ukraine, including depleted uranium emissions for Abrams tanks. That means they have U.S. tanks. The first time the U.S. is sending the controversial armor-piercing munition to Kiev. Again, this is to topple Russia. And people are going to say this is for the national security of America, because they do not want Russian forces, they do not want the country of Russia to gain a foothold what they consider the Western world, okay? Which is going to have them to almost be close to the center and interior of Europe, okay? They don't want them to get that close. They want them to stay on the far east there with China and India, okay? This is about global positioning, okay? Strategic and military positioning, as I stated before, when it comes to the foothold that Russia will gain inside of Europe if they take over Ukraine. That's very important. But as I stated before, don't forget that the Soviet Union was actually formed by Ukraine. When it was in their best interest, it was okay. But when they started to separate the Soviet Union, now it's not okay. All right, okay. I got you, Ukraine. Now, going over to John F. Kennedy's page, he says, since the war began more than a year ago, the United States has given Ukraine more than $113 billion. We already know that number is up to $135 billion. We know it's a lot of money, he says. Some say we are investing too much in Ukraine. Others say it's not enough. but we believe it is worth it. Our aid to Ukraine isn't charity, it's in our national security interests. Is it in our national security interest, or is it in the UK's or Europe's national security interest? And I know some of you guys who are military affiliated, who's been in the military, you know just as well as I know that if they gain a foothold in Ukraine, that they had the propensity, they had the firepower, they had the ammunition and armament to fire rocket-propelled missiles from Ukraine to America. From Ukraine to America, but don't they already have that? Russia can actually shoot missiles to Alaska. They can actually destroy Alaska if they wanted to. They wouldn't even have to touch ground to Alaska. I know we have the NATO defense system, but again, if they fire enough armament and missiles to Alaska, Alaska will be wiped off the map. That's just a fact, okay? But this is to gain a foothold interior to Europe where they can impose more damage to the eastern seaboard of America. That's why he's saying this is kind of like national security. But again, I think it's more so to protect our European neighbors that dwell and reside in the UK. Okay, again, a lot of conjecture here, a lot of perspective, a lot of hyperbole, a lot of bias, a lot of things that I'm going over here, family. So again, as we're coming to close here, just bear with me. I have a couple of more things to cover. Now, let me point you guys over here to the world map. Now, I want you to look at the positioning, location of these countries within the BRICS. You have Russia top right here, and look how large Russia is. Now, majority of the Russian country is uninhabitable, right? It has no natural resources that people can essentially grow food on. It doesn't have any oil. If anything, it has oil underground. But as far as living is concerned, there's not enough living. But look at the amount of border that Russia has. It borders Finland. It borders Belarus. It borders Ukraine, Armenia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia. Okay, it's very close to China. It's a very, very large country already. Then by gangway of the BRICS, you have China, okay? So they border China and they're in cahoots. They're in partnership with China as well. But again, you have North Korea and South Korea. I would not be surprised, okay? I would not be surprised if North Korea joined the BRICS. I would not be surprised. There's a lot of controversial things going on with North Korea, and they will probably tell you, yeah, China is communist, but we at least treat our people to a certain degree decent, all right? Where the United Nations, the humanitarian organizations are not coming after our head. So if North Korea shapes up the way they treat their people and start to kind of show that publicly, and they stop shooting missiles at South Korea in their oceans and ponds and seas and all these other things, and stop shooting missiles over into Japanese territories and waters, look for North Korea here in the next 10 to 20 years to be part of the BRICS. I'm calling it right here on September the 8th, okay? September the 8th, 2023. Look for North Korea to be part of the BRICS in the next 10 to 20 years, okay? I'm just gonna point that out. Now, when it comes to these other things here, family, remember early on there was calling for the Philippines to possibly to join the BRICS, okay? And then it also has some remnants of Indonesia joining the BRICS. Again, they want a stronghold to take part and power of the entire eastern part of the world, okay? I don't think they're gonna reach down to Australia. We understand that Australia is just a colony of the United Kingdom, so I don't even think they would even ask them to be part of it. Then we can come over to India, and India borders Pakistan, and Pakistan borders Afghanistan, so on and so forth, and then Iran. Look how Russia borders all these countries, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and then you have China that borders Mongolia. China borders India. India borders them, and then India borders Pakistan, and then Iran borders Afghanistan. We're getting closer and closer to the western part of Europe as they're gaining footholds. And then These countries that are in North Africa, as they say, they're the North Arab Emirates, okay, including Egypt, as well as Saudi Arabia. And don't forget, Saudi Arabia is right here between Iraq. Let me blow this up for you, family. Saudi Arabia is right here, and between them is Iraq, and then you have Iran. So they majority have the Middle East, with the exception of the known terrorist countries, okay? Now, America, we always try to designate and label Iran as a terrorist country. Now, there is a little bit of information of some terrorists come out of that, but not like Yemen or Oman or even Iraq or Syria to that, or Afghanistan to that. And those countries not even part of the BRICS. But again, what does Iran has more so than those other Middle Eastern countries, as well as Saudi Arabia? Oil, petroleum, okay? And petroleum products, which is very powerful to the infrastructure and the natural resources what the BRICS is trying to formulate in forming that organization together. Now, as we continue on, we have Egypt, but they also included South Africa with its natural currencies like gold, diamonds, and rubies and such. And don't forget, they have the entire country of Brazil, which is the largest country in South America. And guess what is the second largest country in South America? Argentina. So primarily, family, they have control and unified the entire continent of South America. So let's just say that the BRICS own and operate South America. We can now say that the BRICS own and operate, let me move over. Here we go. The BRICS own and operate all of the Eastern world. Russia, China, India, Iran, the Philippines are soon to join. Indonesia's soon to join. Saudi Arabia, okay? The Arab Emirates, Egypt, as well as Ethiopia. And that's on the Horn of Africa going down the eastern seaboard. And I'm not gonna even lie to you, family. Look for countries like Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania to join the BRICS. Because as Vladimir Putin said, the president of Russia, we're going to dive deeper into Russia and do more business with Russian countries. Family, this is highly important. This is highly important because while these countries are formulating partnerships and organizations to topple the Western world power structure, this country still haven't given Foundation Black Americans what are owed to us. So we're going to have the entire world to look forward to. With a declining birth rate, with them only to do deals with Canada and the UK and Australia. Listen, when you look at Australia don't really have any natural resources to offer America, okay? Canada is mostly uninhabitable when it comes to the northern part of Canada. So there's no really natural resources there. When it comes to the UK don't have really no natural resources at all. And all of these countries with all of these natural resources, oil and gas and diamonds and wheat and rice and cotton. Because you know what America's doing? America is doing gentrification. America is selling large amounts of farmlands to foreigners as well as Bill Gates. And then instead of growing food on these farms, guess what a lot of these foreigners and Bill Gates are building on these farmlands? Laboratories. Because now a lot of our food is being grown in laboratories. While these other countries, they're still living their natural way of life. They're still having farms, they're still growing food, they're still giving their people good stuff. And I'm not saying that we should run and flee to other countries, not Foundation Black Americans. What I'm stating to you is this. There's a world power dynamic that's going on. We need to be presently aware of the conditions of the world and the state in which we live. And when we see that all of these countries have formed an organization to topple the economic power structure of the Western world, and we're still forking out millions and billions of dollars to a country that we don't have to a country that's not even part of NATO. This tells you and informs you that America doesn't give a damn about black people. And those people who look like you, who sound like you, and a certain percentage of them who are in political power, who are foundational Black America, are bootlicking Sambos that are doing the work of their puppet masters to undermine foundational Black Americans, to not give us what they owe to our people, as long as they stay in power, as long as their pockets stay fat. This is going to be an interesting world that we live here in the next 5 to 20 years. And family, if we haven't already gotten to the mindset of sitting on our hands for this next president election, then I'm definitely want to encourage you guys. If reparations are not on the table in the form of cash payments, not programs, not programs, families, not vouchers, not grants, but actual cash payments to your bank account, I want to encourage and motivate you guys that no matter who is president, if that's not on the table, is not going to benefit Black Americans. And they're making one presidential candidate worse than the other, using fear-mongering tactics. Time out. Let's stop falling for the same old trick bags year in and year out, every 4 years and every 2 years, when we're voting on a local level, state level, and also a national level. And with that being said, family, know what the hell you're voting for and not the person. Be one.